The auction hall stank of sweat, fear, and disinfectant, a nauseating combination that had become all too familiar to Alara over the years. Her violet skin, naturally luminescent under normal conditions, had dulled to a sickly lavender. The intricate pattern of bioluminescent markings that should have danced across her shoulders and spine remained dark, extinguished by years of malnutrition and abuse. Next item, female Lumidian, approximately 30 standard cycles, announced the auctioneer, a corpulent Vraxian whose multifaceted eyes regarded her with complete indifference. Damaged goods but functional for basic labor, starting bid at 300 credits. The crowd of potential buyers, merchants, mining operators, pleasure den owners, collectively leaned forward to inspect her. Alara kept her eyes downcast, three-fingered hands clasped before her. The neural inhibitor at the base of her skull prevented any resistance, but even without it, she'd learned years ago that defiance only brought more pain. "Show the damages," barked a Taurian merchant from the front row. The handler roughly turned her around, lifting the thin, soiled garment that barely covered her. The audience murmured at the sight of the deep, silvery scars crisscrossing her back, permanent reminders of disciplinary measures from previous owners. One particularly prominent scar ran from her right shoulder down to her hip, a souvenir from an owner who discovered her attempting to access the communications array on his ship. "As you can see, this one needed considerable correction," the auctioneer continued, his tone suggesting mild disappointment in damaged merchandise. "However, Lumidians are hardy. She's been cleared of disease and has at least 50 more years of service remaining. Nonverbal due to vocal cord modification, but understands basic fluently." 200, offered someone from the back, clearly lowballing. 250, countered another voice half-heartedly. The bidding stalled there. Even at such a reduced price, nobody wanted a broken toy. Alara had seen this pattern before with other slaves. Once you'd been passed around enough times, accumulated enough scars, you became less valuable. Eventually, unsold slaves were typically dispatched to processing centers, where they would be euthanized and harvested for any valuable biological components. "Final call at 250, the auctioneer announced, barely concealing his impatience. 500. The unexpected bid silenced the room. Alara's gaze flickered upward involuntarily, searching for the source. A human male stood at the back of the hall, leaning against the wall with arms crossed. He appeared to be in his late 30s by human standards, with dark skin, close-cropped black hair streaked with silver, and a beard that framed a face marked by deep laugh lines around the eyes. 500 from the human trader, the auctioneer confirmed, suddenly interested. "Any counter offers?" The room remained silent. Most species in this sector maintained an uneasy relationship with humans, too unpredictable, too sentimental, and yet disturbingly effective in galactic commerce. "Sold to Captain Marcus Reeves," the auctioneer declared, striking his illuminated panel. The handler shoved Alara toward her new owner. She stumbled, her thin frame weak from months of minimal sustenance. As she approached, she kept her head down, bracing for inspection, for rough handling, for the inevitable assessment of her capabilities. Instead, a worn but clean jacket fell across her shoulders. "Let's go," the human said quietly. "My ship's not far." Alara followed, her mind racing with confusion and the dull throb of fear that had become her constant companion. The human, Marcus, did not pull her by the restraints or push her forward. He simply walked ahead, occasionally glancing back to ensure she was following. Outside, the spaceport's three suns were setting, casting long shadows across the landing pads. Marcus led her to a mid-sized cargo vessel, its hull bearing the scars of decades of interstellar travel. "Welcome to the Horizon Trader," he said as the entry ramp descended. "It's not much, but it's home." Home, a concept Alara had long forgotten. The first 2 weeks aboard the Horizon Trader passed in a blur of confusion for Alara. Marcus had given her a small private cabin, an unheard-of luxury for a slave, with an actual bed, clean clothes, and regular meals. Each morning, she expected the facade to crumble, for him to reveal his true intentions, or to activate the neural inhibitor still embedded at the base of her skull. But the cruelty never came. Instead, Marcus maintained a respectful distance. He spoke to her casually as he went about his daily routine, never seeming bothered by her silence or flinching at the sight of her scars. He explained ship operations, their destination, a trading outpost in the Cygnus sector, and left data pads with books and information where she could access them. "I've scheduled a medical appointment when we reach Drayson Station," he mentioned one day as they shared the small galley. Alara froze mid-bite, her three-fingered hand trembling slightly. Medical facilities had only ever meant pain for her, experimental procedures, sterilization, the vocal cord modification that had rendered her mute. Marcus seemed to notice her fear. "It's just to remove that inhibitor," he clarified, pointing to the back of his own neck. "Then you'll be free to choose what you want to do next. Stay on as crew if you want, I could use the help, or I can arrange passage somewhere else." Ilara stared at him, uncomprehending. No owner had ever offered her choices before. Their journey was interrupted 3 days later when the ship's engine suffered a critical failure while navigating an asteroid field. Warning lights flashed as the vessel began to drift dangerously toward a cluster of jagged rocks. "Damn it," Marcus shouted, frantically working the controls. "The primary coolant line must have ruptured." Ilara knew this ship model. Her third owner had operated an identical vessel, forcing her to perform maintenance in spaces too small for most humanoids. Without thinking, she bolted from the cockpit toward engineering. The engine room was rapidly filling with superheated steam. Ilara spotted the problem immediately, a fractured coolant pipe near the reactor core. She grabbed tools from a nearby panel and slid into the narrow maintenance shaft where the damage was worst. The heat was suffocating, burning her sensitive skin, but her species could withstand higher temperatures than humans. Working rapidly, she bypassed the damaged section, rerouting coolant flow through an auxiliary system. The temperature began to stabilize. When she emerged, covered in sweat and engine grease, Marcus was standing in the doorway, relief evident on his face. "You saved us both," he said simply. That night, Ilara used a ship terminal to type her first message to him. "My fourth owner was a ship engineer. I learned to repair these engine types." Marcus smiled when he read it. "Well, you're a natural. We make a good team." The next morning, Ilara found a small, wrapped package outside her cabin door. Inside was a translator device, specially calibrated for species with vocal limitations. A note accompanied it, "Until we can get that inhibitor removed. Your thoughts deserve to be heard." Ilara held the device against her throat, and for the first time in 7 years, communicated directly with another being. "Thank you," the mechanical voice translated her neural impulses. The words were flat, emotionless through the machine, but Marcus's smile was warm enough for both of them. "You're welcome, Ilara." It was the first time he'd used her name. "It's good to finally meet you." Something inside her shifted then, like the first crack in an ice sheet that had encased her for years. Not trust, not yet, but possibility. Drayson Station loomed before them, a massive wheel of metal and light spinning slowly against the backdrop of a crimson nebula. Ilara stood rigidly beside Marcus as they navigated the crowded docking bay, her newly acquired translator clutched tightly in her hand. Without the neural inhibitor constantly suppressing her autonomic responses, her bioluminescent markings had begun to flicker faintly across her skin, betraying her anxiety. "It'll be quick," Marcus assured her as they made their way to the medical sector. "Dr. Voss is former Alliance Navy. She's removed hundreds of these devices." The procedure itself was mercifully brief. When Ilara awoke from sedation, the constant pressure at the base of her skull, a sensation so familiar she'd almost forgotten it was there, had vanished. In its place was lightness, and with it an overwhelming flood of sensation. Colors seemed brighter, sounds sharper. Her natural empathic abilities, severely dampened by the inhibitor, began to return in disorienting waves. "Take it slow," Dr. Voss cautioned, her gray eyes kind beneath bushy eyebrows. "Your neural pathways need time to readjust." As they explored the station over the following days while Marcus conducted his business, Ilara experienced both wonder and terror at her newfound freedom. No longer property under galactic rim law, she now possessed identification documents listing her as a free sentient and crew member of the Horizon Trader. One evening, while wandering through the station's commercial district, they passed a small establishment where haunting music drifted from an open doorway. Ilara stopped abruptly, drawn by the melody. "Want to go in?" Marcus asked. Inside, various species gathered around small tables, while a Centaurian musician played an instrument resembling a cross between a harp and a theremin. The sound resonated through Ilara's body, awakening long-dormant memories. "My people, we communicate through harmonics," she typed into her translator. "Music is part of our language." When the performance ended, Marcus spoke briefly with the proprietor, then beckoned Alara forward. "He says you can try it if you want." Her hands trembled as she approached the instrument. It had been so long, almost 15 years since her capture, since she'd touched anything musical. Tentatively, her fingers found the sensor fields and she began to play. The melody started hesitantly, then grew stronger as muscle memory returned. The luminescent patterns across her skin brightened and pulsed in rhythm with the music, creating a visual symphony that complemented the auditory one. The room fell silent as she played, channeling years of unspoken pain and longing into the ethereal sounds. When she finally stopped, the silence lingered for a heartbeat before applause erupted. Looking up, she saw Marcus watching her with an expression of profound respect. "That was incredible," he said later as they returned to the ship. "Your species, the Lumidians, they're known for their musical abilities, aren't they?" The next day, a small synthesizer appeared in her cabin, a gift from Marcus. "Practice," the note said simply. As Alara reconnected with this essential part of herself, other changes followed. Using the ship's communication array, Marcus helped her contact a Lumidian cultural preservation center. To her astonishment, they confirmed her identity from genetic records. She wasn't just any Lumidian, she was Alara Vashi, daughter of a respected harmonics master, presumed dead after raiders attacked her home settlement. "You had a life," Marcus said softly as they reviewed the information together, "and you can have one again." That night, for the first time since her rescue, Alara initiated physical contact, briefly pressing her palm against Marcus's in the traditional Lumidian gesture of gratitude. The spark of connection between them was unmistakable, carrying a deeper resonance than either had anticipated. The cargo bay of the Horizon trader had been transformed. Storage containers formed a makeshift perimeter around an open space where Marcus had installed a set of training mats. Here, each morning cycle for the past month, he had been teaching Alara basic self-defense techniques. "Remember, it's not about strength," he demonstrated, easily sidestepping her attempt to grapple him. "It's about leverage and momentum." Alara's movements had become more fluid with practice, her once emaciated frame gradually filling out with lean muscle. The regular exercise and proper nutrition had worked miracles. Her violet skin now glowed with healthy luminescence, the patterns across her shoulders pulsing with exertion and determination. "Better," Marcus approved, as she successfully executed a defensive maneuver. "Though your left side is still favoring that old injury." Their training sessions had evolved beyond mere physical exercise. For Alara, they represented reclaiming ownership of her body, learning that it could be a source of strength rather than just a vessel for enduring pain. Each successful block or countermove was a small victory against her past. Later, as they shared a meal in the galley, Alara studied Marcus's profile. She no longer needed the translator device to communicate simple thoughts. Lumidians were natural telepathic empaths with those they trusted, though she still used it for complex conversations. "Why did you really buy me at that auction?" she asked suddenly, the mechanical voice failing to capture the vulnerability behind the question. Marcus set down his utensil, considering his response carefully. "I was there looking for parts dealers when I saw you." He paused. "No sentient being deserves to be treated as property. I couldn't walk away." "But you paid 500 credits. That's significant." "Best investment I ever made," he replied with a small smile. "Got me the finest engineer in the quadrant and," he hesitated, "someone I've come to care about deeply." The admission hung between them, shifting the atmosphere in the small room. Alara's markings pulsed with a new pattern, one that reflected emotions she'd believed had been permanently extinguished. That night she appeared at his cabin door. When it slid open, they regarded each other in silence before she slowly extended her hand, palm facing upward, a Lumidian invitation of intimacy. Their first kiss was tentative, exploratory. Alara trembled at the contact, decades of conditioning making her expect pain to follow pleasure. Instead, Marcus guided her gently, withdrawing whenever her anxiety spiked, allowing her to set the pace of their discovery. "We have time," he whispered against her temple, "all the time you need." 2 weeks later, they docked at Kellan Station for a routine delivery. While Marcus negotiated with local merchants, Alara wandered through the busy marketplace, reveling in her ability to move freely among the crowd. Her confidence had grown enough that she no longer flinched when strangers approached. The blow to her confidence came unexpectedly. A harsh voice called out from behind her, "Property, Lumidian female." She turned to find herself face to face with Dorvan Krell, her fifth owner, the one who had ordered her vocal cords modified after she had sung a forbidden Lumidian resistance ballad. The Taurian merchant looked shocked, then calculating as he stepped toward her. "Fascinating, my investment wasn't destroyed after all," he rumbled, reaching for her arm. "You still bear my registration mark. Under Rim law, you remain my property regardless of who currently possesses you." Alara stepped back, her markings flashing warning patterns, but fear threatened to paralyze her. "She belongs to no one," came Marcus's voice as he materialized beside her. "She's a free citizen under both Alliance and Independent World's protocols." "This doesn't concern you, human," Krell growled. "Actually, it does," Marcus replied, activating his comm unit to display Alara's newly issued citizenship documents. "And I've just notified station security about your attempted unlawful detention of a free sentient." As security officers approached, Alara found her courage. Using her translator, she addressed her former tormentor directly. "I am Alara Envashi. I have a name, a past, and a future, and none of them belong to you." Krell backed away, but his parting words carried a threat. "This isn't over." That night, as they left the station, Alara joined Marcus in his bed. This time, there was no hesitation as she initiated their intimacy, her bioluminescence creating patterns of light that danced across both their bodies as she reclaimed another piece of herself through pleasure freely given and received. All rise for the Galactic Tribunal of Justice. The imposing chamber fell silent as 7 judges, representing various species from across known space, entered and took their positions at the elevated bench. Below them, the prosecution team prepared to present their case against one of the largest slavery operations in the Outer Rim territories. Alara sat rigidly in the witness preparation room, her formal attire feeling strange after months of comfortable clothes aboard the Horizon Trader. Marcus sat beside her, his hand occasionally brushing hers in reassurance. "Remember, you don't have to do this," he said quietly. "Yes, I do," she replied, her translator device now upgraded to a subcutaneous implant that better approximated natural speech patterns. "For those who didn't survive, for those still waiting to be found." When her name was called, she walked into the chamber with her head held high. The luminescent patterns across her skin formed the traditional Lumidian symbols for truth and justice, patterns she had practiced for weeks to perfect after so many years of suppression. For 3 hours, she testified. She described in meticulous detail the operations of the slavery ring, the transport routes, the auction houses, the training facilities where difficult acquisitions were broken. She named names, provided dates, identified key figures in the criminal enterprise, including Dorvan Krell, who now sat among the defendants, his massive Taurian frame diminished by restraints and the weight of the evidence against him. Throughout her testimony, Alara maintained perfect composure, her voice steady through the translator. Only Marcus, who had become attuned to the subtle changes in her bioluminescence, could see the emotional toll each recounted memory extracted from her. When the chief prosecutor asked why she had come forward despite the personal risk, Alara's answer was simple. "Because someone showed me that freedom isn't just the absence of chains. It's the presence of choice, dignity, and hope. Everyone deserves that chance." Her eyes briefly met Marcus's across the chamber. 6 months later, with the major players in the slavery ring sentenced to various penal colonies, Alara stood on the observation deck of the Horizon Trader, which now sported a new paint job and upgraded systems, thanks to the reward money from the tribunal case. The ship was no longer just a cargo vessel. A significant portion had been converted into temporary accommodation for rescued slaves in transit to rehabilitation centers. Currently, they were transporting 3 recently freed Arcturians and a young Phenoxian to the renowned recovery facility on New Avalon. "Course plotted for the New Avalon system," Marcus announced as he joined her at the viewport. "We'll arrive in about 3 standard days." Alara nodded, leaning into him as his arm encircled her waist. The gold band on her left hand, a human custom she had embraced, caught the light from a passing star. Around her neck hung a harmonics pendant, the traditional Lumidian symbol of permanent partnership. "The young one is finally sleeping," she said, referring to the Phenoxian child they had rescued. "I played the calming sequences you helped me practice." "Your music always works wonders," Marcus replied. "Did I tell you I received a message from Dr. Voss? She says the medical center on Drayson has approved our proposal for vocal cord regeneration research. With properly directed stem cell therapy, you might be able to speak, even sing. Again someday." Ilara smiled. "That would be wonderful, but it's not essential anymore. I found my voice in other ways." Indeed, she had. In the 18 months since her rescue, Ilara had become a powerful advocate for slavery victims, developed a music therapy program specifically for trauma recovery, and co-founded an underground network that identified and extracted vulnerable beings from dangerous situations. The Horizon Trader was currently on its way to its 7th rescue mission, with intelligence provided by former slaves now working within the system to dismantle it from within. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly, "spending 500 credits on a broken toy that day?" Marcus turned her to face him, his expression serious. "You were never broken, just wounded, and you've healed yourself. I just provided the safe space for you to do it." Later that night, as they lay together in their shared quarters, Ilara's bioluminescence created intricate patterns across their intertwined bodies, patterns that spoke of love, resilience, and hope in a language that transcended words. As Marcus traced the glowing lines with gentle fingers, Ilara reflected on how far she had come. She had been sold as damaged goods, a discarded possession deemed worthless by a cruel system. Now she was whole, not because someone had fixed her, but because someone had believed she could heal herself when given the chance. And in that healing, she had discovered humanity's true power. Not their technology or their strength, but their capacity for compassion that could lift others from darkness into light, one soul at a time. Outside their viewport, stars streaked by as the Horizon Trader carried its precious cargo of recovering lives toward new beginnings, just as one human had once done for her.